Jasmine is online. Yes? Can we see Jasmine? We can invite her in maybe already. Yeah. Welcome back, everyone, from the coffee break. Did you enjoy the exercise? Yes. Yes. Thank you, Roberto, for sharing it. I already see that people are taking home the cubes to appropriate in a positive way the exercise for the different contact zones we are using. Meanwhile, in my back, there's Jasmine on the screen. I will introduce you in a second. Jasmine, it's great that you are with us. Just for your context and as a reminder for all of us, we have already got a full day, conference day behind us. We are in the Goethe Institute, you know, they make us start at 9:30 in the morning. So since 9:30 this morning, we are already keeping our minds busy about the role of contact zones, what a contact zone might mean in a cultural institution in order for very different citizens and groups of people, communities to meet and first of all to listen to each other without polarizing. What kind of role can cultural institutions play? We've just come out of an exercise where Roberto has introduced the improbable cubes, a game where we build narratives that originated from very personal memories, but produced funny stories, touching stories, again, personal stories, but that have made us aware of the multitude, the endless multitude of stories that can live together. And the question is how they live together. Now, we've also said this morning that this project has as a goal not only to establish contact zones and train us for contact zones, but also make politicians aware of the need to develop instruments that contribute to what we called this morning cultural democracy. The term cultural democracy was used quite a lot. And now I'm really happy to introduce Jasmine Berdak because Jasmine is heading the directorate at the Spanish Ministry of Culture in Spain, the Spanish Ministry, very funny, for cultural rights. And I've got here, when I met you in Madrid 2 or 3 weeks ago in the conservatoire, I took this brochure about the cultural rights plan of Spain. And this is really one of the most, if not the most most impressive national cultural policy initiative in the EU that I am aware of. And I can tell you I am rather aware. And I'm really happy that Jasmine will take 10 minutes to explain to us the concept of cultural rights and how this has come into life in Spain. And afterwards, we will discuss it and see what are the obstacles for us in our institutions, in our work environment, in our country, to get closer to cultural rights, and whether this cultural rights thinking is a thinking in which our contact zones could be hooked and rooted. Because if that is the case, then we might have that stepping stone for our project to work towards recommendations, policy recommendations, and this manifesto that we want to do. So Jasmine comes in at a moment when our minds are warmed up to present cultural rights, and we are happy to discuss it afterwards. Jasmine, you've got the floor for 10 minutes or so, as long as you want, but longer if you want, but not too long. We want to discuss also with you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. And thank you very much for inviting me to share the main lines of action of cultural rights of the Ministry of Culture in Spain. Before I move on, I'd like to give a bit of context of the General Directorate that was created in March 2024. It was the first time cultural rights have a place within the ministry structure. It represents really a new strategic focus for the ministry, and it brings a new approach to public cultural policies, complementing and expanding the traditional heritage and sector-based perspective. what I like to share now are the main contributions of this new framework and a few notes of the cultural rights plan that we have recently launched. Let's start with the contributions. Always, I say that we can sum up these contributions in three key points, fundamental. The first is how we understand culture. I mean, how cultural rights transform the way that we understand culture. The second is the priorities of cultural policies. And the third is the role of public institutions. So I'm going to explain now how the framework of cultural rights transform these three ambits or these three lines. No, the idea of culture, the priorities of policies, and the role of public institutions. If we think about how we understand culture, the first and the most immediate point is understanding and recognizing culture as a human right. Okay, this isn't something new. Even if using cultural rights as a public policy framework is relatively recent, the idea of cultural right as human right is not recent. Cultural rights appear in 1948 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the Article 27, and in 1966 in the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights in the Article 15. Both texts state the right to take part in and participate in cultural life. Everyone, the literacy of this text is everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community. No, this idea of participating in cultural life is important because implies a broad notion of culture, a notion that goes beyond access to cultural goods and cultural services, and allows us to think of cultural life in a wide sense. I mean, developing expressive and artistic abilities, using and transforming tradition, using language, accessing artistic education, community culture, creating and running cultural projects, taking part in decisions about cultural policies, and cultural rights help us move past a narrow access-only approach and understand culture in a much broader way. That's why we speak of cultural rights in plural, not just a single right of access to culture. And of course, this approach situates people as active agents, not just consumer or spectator, but individual and communities with the ability to shape their own cultural life. In short, it means moving away from seeing culture only as a product, a show, or an object, and instead understanding it as a social practice and a set of abilities that everyone can develop, and as a field where essential human and community rights are exercised. And this matter, and this is very important, because with cultural rights, culture is no longer something reserved to specialists or only for cultural professionals, but it becomes a shared tool that all people have to understand, to interpret, and to act upon the world. I mean, in essential, a common gut and a social practice that everyone can share. No, so is this the first contribution of cultural rights to expand the idea of culture beyond the only access to service to God, but to develop all our capacities related with art and culture. In the second place, we talk about the priorities of cultural policies. And when we look at the priorities of cultural policies, the cultural rights framework help us move beyond a public policy model that achieved good things, like some degree of cultural democratization and a stronger institutional commitment, but also reach clear limits. It has neither guaranteed the effective exercise of cultural rights and nor created sustainable conditions for cultural work. Cultural policies have accumulated, I think, 4 major deficits. The first is treating culture as a resource for extractive interest, for example, tourism or real estate investment. Also focusing mainly on production instead of on reception, mediation, participation, and the cultural life of citizens. Also being centered on the cultural sector as the main interlocutor with the administration without improving its structural condition. And in the last place, deepening the confusion between public policy and offering cultural program, which I think is the big misunderstanding when we think about cultural policies. So the cultural rights approach help address these limits by putting two fundamental priorities at the center. First, citizens as the main focus of cultural policy, and second, the mission of guaranteeing the exercise of cultural participation for the majority of the population. Okay? And this leads us to 3 guiding principles for public action. Equity, plurality, and cross-sectorality. Okay? If we think about equity, culture is maybe one of the areas where inequalities are most reproduced and least addressed. Public resources now are often allocated to people who already have access. There's a study by Arts Council England shows that publicly funded cultural activities reach only 8% of population, including the top 2% of high income groups. And another key reference is the book Culture is Bad for You, that is a brilliant investigation into inequalities in culture. And this book shows that in general, people don't take part in cultural activities unless they already work in the cultural field. So equity is not about including minorities, but it's about recognizing that the majority of society is currently excluded from cultural life, which is dominated by very specific groups. So public institutions, therefore, need to address structural inequality, class, socioeconomic status, gender, territory, ethnicity, disability, and their intersection, or else we risk deepening them. No, so it's I think it's very important to take conscience about plurality. It means understanding that our societies are already multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multilingual, and treating this as a shared collective asset. This doesn't mean ignoring inequalities or power structures, but acknowledging the real cultural diversity of our communities, no? And this requires expanding what we consider legitimate cultural practice and redistributing resources among a wider diversity of cultural actors. And in third place, the idea of cross-sectoriality, that it means, in essential, that culture is not an isolated field. It's in its own specific way. It's connect with many other areas of life and can contribute to addressing major collective challenges. Culture has positive impacts on education, on physical and mental health, the environment and local identity. In fact, it is actually the second most important factor of community attachment, the culture, no? So it also stresses human rights, peace, freedom, and democracy. And for all this reason, we need to stop seeing culture only as a sector and instead strengthen its connection with other fields, no? And doing this also helps give cultural real practical relevance. It improves well-being, supports learning, creates community spaces, and contributes to a better future. And in the last place, how the framework of cultural rights transform the role of public institutions. And it gives the opportunity to ask what does it mean for culture to be a public service and a part of a public policy? Because in other areas, maybe it's clear, no? The state provides services or facilities like healthcare or social care, but culture works differently, no? Institutions don't produce culture. Culture is created by society, but by people, by communities. This means, as Alphonse Martinel often says, evolving from a state that provides culture, that grants access to culture, to a state that enables people, no? In other words, a state that creates the conditions for everyone to develop their cultural capacities, or as Marilena Chagui puts it, a state that allows the cultural projects already present in society to grow and flourish, and a state that ensures people can be protagonists of their own cultural life and have a full cultural experience. And for this reason, public institutions must focus on supporting what happened outside the institution, creating the condition for practice proposals and formats to grow and multiply beyond the institution itself. Culture becomes richer and more alive the more it goes beyond institutional boundaries. So this leads to a paradox in public cultural management, because the more we support whatever grows beyond us, beyond the institution, the more successful is the work of the institution, no? And this doesn't mean not intervening. On the contrary, intervention is essential, but not by defining content, instead by shaping the condition of production, circulation, and distribution so that the cultural field becomes more equitable, diverse, distributed, and sustainable, no? And that is the real purpose of cultural policy. So these are the main contributions, the idea of culture, priorities, and the role of institution. But in the end, cultural rights point to a simple and essential idea that cultural right allows us to understand culture as a shared everyday social practice, and as Raymond Williams described it, and that the ultimate purpose of cultural policy is the whole citizenry, no? Guaranteeing people's right and enabling the development of our cultural capacities. So I'm going near to the end now, and based on these principles, we have launched a cultural right plan within the Spanish Ministry of Culture. This plan is the roadmap and guiding framework from the ministry's commitment of cultural rights, a document that sets out the goals, priority, actions, and resources needed to carry out this policy. It was developed through a broad participatory process. Contribution to the diagnosis and proposals came from more than 300 experts and organizations through working groups, interviews, and questionnaires, meetings with professional associations from the cultural sector, around 1,000 citizen contributions through our online platform, input from regional governments through the sectorial conference, and collaboration with other ministries to designing joint actions, no? The plan is organized around 5 goals. First, guaranteeing cultural democracy, and I mean addressing participation barriers and strength cultural participation, education, and mediation. In second, culture for contemporary challenges with action linked to gender, equality, diversity, health, climate change, territorial policy, science, and democratic memory. In third place, reinforcing the sustainability of the cultural sector, because cultural rights also include the rights of people working in culture. And two internal goals that are consolidating cultural right as a public policy framework and adapting the administration to this approach. Something that may seem minor, but is actually crucial to develop to the framework of cultural right. You can see the all 146 measure on the website that is called Plan de Derechos Culturales. I can send in the chat later. And just as the plan has a strong participatory dimension in its design, it also has it in its implementation. No, the plan is born within the ministry, but it aims to become a shared roadmap with the wider cultural ecosystem, and its success will depend on our ability to build this alliance with all the sector, with all the administration, with all the agents that works in culture. So I think that I have spent my 10 minutes more or less. Thank you much for opening this space to share the work we are doing at the ministry. And I'm happy to go deeper into any aspect you want to explore.
Great. Thanks so much, Jasmine, for sharing this really, really impressive work that you've been doing. And I'm glad that you also mentioned how extensive the consultation process was, and that it was a bottom-up process, and that the plan is in essence about participation, but it is also an outcome of a participatory process. I think that's very important. While you are thinking about questions that you might have to Jasmine, I'm taking the privilege of having a microphone and ask the first two questions. You mentioned resources, and I know that you are earmarking budget for it. So it's not only a set of measures and intentions. Can you say 2 or 3 sentences about how you fund a movement towards this cultural rights plan?
Okay. It's possible that I answer in Spanish. Roberto, help me.
Yes. Roberto is here.
Gracias, Jazmín. Primero, let me to tell her in Spanish. Gracias por tu explicación, creo que es muy clara. Y he de decir, luego lo diré en inglés, que realmente yo me siento orgulloso de que nuestro Ministerio de Cultura esté trabajando en esta línea y sea pionero en Europa en este trabajo. I'm proud for the work that our ministry is doing in this field. Lars te está preguntando, habéis planteado una serie de medidas concretas. Bueno, si puedes ver un poco cómo se financian estas about funding.
Yeah.
¿Cómo se financian estas medidas? 2 frases de cómo se financian estas medidas de todas las que habéis planteado.
Como decía Lars, no es una declaración de intenciones, sino que es una agenda de acciones. El plan está dividido en 2 periodos, de 2025 a 2027 y luego de 2027 a 2030. Hemos previsto una ejecución para 2027, coincidiendo con la legislatura actual, y para este periodo de ejecución hay previstos unos 80 millones de euros, de los cuales 46 millones son de nueva inversión. Es decir, se ha hecho un esfuerzo en un contexto de presupuestos prorrogados, conseguir una inversión de 46 millones de euros nueva.
46 millones nueva, ¿y cuánto has dicho el total?
79 en total,
79 en total.
79 en total del periodo 2005-2027.
Okay. This plan is not a declaration of wishes, of intentions. It's a real plan with real measures and with extra funding in total from 2025 to 2030, 79 millions of euro. But the new budget, the real new budget is 46 million euro. That is very important in the context of the economy. Spanish is growing, really, but in a lot of institutions, they are cutting the budgets about culture. Then it's very important this budget in this situation.
One acceleration. The whole time for the plan is 2025-2030, but the first period of execution is 2025-2027.
Yeah.
And this 79 millions, it's 2025-2027.
Okay, it's clear.
Super. No, that's impressive, I would say. Last quick question. You said that it has 146 measures, the plan. And I'm looking particularly, and this is because of this audience, and we've been talking a lot about historic trauma and also how stories that are not told. We are in Romania. We had a focus on how Roma history is told and mediated. And I want to share with this audience the measures 103 to 107. Well, I will read it. I'm not testing you. I'm reading them out. 103 is, for instance, continue the inventory of assets seized during the civil war and Franco's dictatorship. 104 is launch the historical archive of social movements to recognize the different roles of social groups during the dictatorship. Promotion of measures aimed at closing Francoist foundations. Efforts to continue to promote recognition of great figures in art and culture who were persecuted during Francoism. Recognition of the clandestine artist movements that developed during the Civil War. So this is very, very concrete. Could you, and I can imagine it's contested. It's probably not easy to get that in. I don't think there is every single Spanish citizen will sign up to this. How did you mediate the process to get them in?
He entendido la pregunta, ¿eh?
Vale, perfecto.
Bueno, esta es una apuesta específica por este ministerio. Es un compromiso que este ministerio adquiere con un trabajo de memoria que venía siendo necesario en el ámbito español, porque no se digamos, existe una ley de memoria que no se estaba desarrollando como se debía. Entonces, en el Ministerio de Cultura se ha abierto una línea de trabajo específica que se llama Cultura con Memoria, que incluye todas estas medidas y que también responde a una demanda y una necesidad de un sector de población española también muy amplio.
Okay, it's a compromise from this ministry to work with a memory that is necessary in Spain, because although there is a memory law, is not enough developed, and from Ministry of Culture they thought that we must work in culture with memory, that include these measures that Lars have talked before. Okay, about dictator, about civil war, about because now we are living in Spain some movements like in other parts of Europe. Let me to say something. More or less 20% of young people under 25 think that with Franco in Spain we'll live better. This is dangerous. Do you understand?
Yeah, but in the light of these figures, it's remarkable that this is in here. That's really great. Thank you, Jasmine. We have time for a few questions before we leave Jasmine into freedom. Yes, please. Maybe we need a microphone so that Jasmine hears it. If you.
Thank you. Where we can find the whole program? It's online. It's available online. Yeah. Can you say something? It's available for everyone, or is just in Spanish? Or thank you.
Yeah.
Sí,
Sí.
sí está disponible.
Sí, que he entendido,
¿Dónde
he
está
entendido.
disponible?
Mira, está disponible en la página web.
You can get it in the web of the Culture Ministry.
Por el chat puedo pasar la dirección.
Yeah, no, you can, yeah, puede pasarlo. She can put in the chat.
I don't know.
And I've got it here, and you can just take a picture of the.
You have it? Because it's a site
No.
specific. It's a site specific that it's called Plan Derechos Culturales.
Plan Derechos Culturales.
Plan Derechos Culturales. I don't find the chat here. Yes. Yes, I find it. Wait a moment.
Okay, maybe we can put it up then. Okay.
Yes, wait a
Joachim.
moment.
And you have in English as well.
So in the site, in the website, you have a executive version and a whole version. The executive version is in English also. Okay, both of them are in Spanish and in all the official languages of Spain: Catalan, Basque, Galician.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how it
I have to be visible. Yes.
Yeah.
If you prefer, you can read in Basque.
Yeah.
Basque.
Yeah.
And
One more question by
but the executive version is in English also, and we also have a version of in Spanish. It's called Lectura Fácil. I don't know how it is called in English.
Easy reading. Easy reading.
Easy reading
method.
Yeah.
Yes, for accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jasmine, for these wonderful plans. But it's really very nice to hear that. But I may say a little but, if you permit. First of all, I want to answer to Roberto. You know, the young people in Romania having nostalgia for Ceausescu is still much higher than this 20%.
I know.
So, but the but is how isn't this plan an illusion? As long as we see that Europe is, that we see the social differences in Europe. That means, can such a plan of cultural diplomacy succeed if the social differences in Europe gets always bigger? This is my first question. And the second one, I would like to know, because we know the key of cultural diplomacy and equality is education, is access to schools, to university, to things like this. Is your plan, and how is your plan related to measures to improve this access? Thank you.
Sí, para
La primera, la segunda la entendí, pero la primera no.
Sí, no, bueno, está planteando si cada vez hay más desigualdad en general en Europa, y eso está también un poco relacionado con tendencias, digamos, más extremas, más polarizadas en este momento, también en Rumanía, con muchos jóvenes, jóvenes que no han vivido la etapa de Ceausescu con cierta nostalgia de esa etapa, y lo relaciona con la segunda. ¿En qué medida, valga la reiteración, habéis planteado medidas que intervienen en el ámbito educativo, que parece ser el clave para cambiar esta situación y que realmente estos temas de memoria y demás en relación a los derechos culturales tengan respuesta?
Vale. A ver, lo primero, el apartado de memoria es un apartado específico dentro de un plan mucho más amplio. Es decir, no es un plan, el plan de derechos culturales, lo central no son las políticas de memoria, ¿vale? Eso es lo primero. Forma parte, pero no es lo único. Respecto a la desigualdad, uno de los objetivos principales del plan es intentar reducir la desigualdad tanto en el acceso a la cultura como cómo el acceso a la cultura puede contribuir a reducir las desigualdades, ¿vale? Roberto, sí, lo tienes,
Sí,
¿no?
sí.
Vale,
Sí, sí.
entonces, relacionado con la segunda pregunta, hay un eje específico en el plan sobre la interacción, la interrelación entre la cultura y el ámbito educativo. Y aquí hay una idea que me parece importante. Si quieres, di lo que he dicho antes ahora y luego te digo lo siguiente.
I'll try to
Ok.
express. The policy about memory is part of the plan, but it's not the main focus, the key concept of the plan. Okay, but about how to reduce the inequality, yeah, in the access to culture, and how the access to culture could help to reduce the inequality in society. Okay, in the first part of the intervention of Jazmín, she has talked about how to use culture as an instrument, but not to be instrumentalized. Okay, and of course we can reduce the inequality through culture, but the first part is how to reduce the inequality in the access to culture. Okay.
Okay.
I continue, and with the education as question, hay un eje específico de educación en el plan, pero hay una idea que es fundamental y es el acceso a la educación en el siglo XXI ya no está consiguiendo una redistribución de alguna manera, no es un elemento de redistribución social. Es decir, ahora mismo una persona, un chaval o un niño, una niña que sale de un centro de élite o que de un instituto de élite o que sale de un instituto popular tiene el mismo título, pero las competencias que les diferencian son de orden cultural: capacidad expresiva, capacidad de pensamiento asociativo, capacidad relacional. Por lo tanto, es fundamental distribuir las capacidades culturales. Creo que eso es, y ese es uno de los objetivos principales del plan. Hay un político y un teórico español, Joan Subirats, que dice que si en el siglo XX la educación era un instrumento de redistribución, en el siglo XXI lo es la cultura.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Let me.
Do your best.
Do your best. Yes.
Okay, in the plan there is a specific ambit about education, but really in the 21st century, education is not enough to provoke the real distribution of opportunities, because the one children that goes to high school, private high school in the elite, or children that go to public schools, other public schools, have the same title, the same degree, but don't have the same skills, the same real opportunities, because the distribution of cultural capacities really are very different. Joan Subirats, that is a former minister of culture in Spain, is a very, very interesting thinker, says that if in the 20th century education was the best tool to social redistribution, in the 21st century is the culture.
Thank you very much, Jasmine, for being with us and for sharing these ambitious ideas. And I hope we will engage in more conversations like this and also follow through the implementation of the plan in the next years and reflect on it and hopefully have a lot of spillover across Europe. We will keep talking in this workshop about it, but I want to thank you for your presence and free you for the tasks that are on your agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much and happy to be here.
Muchas gracias, Admin.
Ciao.
Bye.